if you had to identify a case, a circumstance, a matter where you were pleased with yourself, that this was, I don't know quite where it came from, but a moment of genius. What would you say? What happened?
Okay, there were two kinds of things I can talk to. One talks to the question of craft, working with a situation and realizing that you did something that really made a difference and helped lead to a good and satisfactory resolution. You know, a particular way of reframing something, seeing something in a conflict that the people themselves weren't, sharing that observation with them and having them look at each other. We never saw that. And I have that happen. It happens to me a lot within the context of my work, without giving the details of a particular situation, where there's a tendency in organizations for people to understand the conflicts between them in terms of the personal dynamics between them or the qualities of each other as individuals. And simultaneously, for them not to recognize the way in which structural features of their organization are contributing to the conflict between them, so that they understand it personally.
The system is making us...
Right, yeah, I mean, yeah, they're set in opposition to each other. They don't realize the way in which their roles have been defined, or the way in which communication works, or responsibilities doled out, that they're actually set up so that they can't work well together. They understand that in personal terms. Sometimes they'll understand it in identity terms. It's racial or gender or whatever it may be. And you talk with them about their situation, okay, and you get some sense of when does the conflict develop, around what kinds of issues, what goes on in the transactions, when does annoyance set in, what happens that, you know, that. And if you can point out to them or help them see that there's something in the way their roles have been defined, or the absence of certain kind of communication that's leading to this conflict, that they're both being victimized, as it were.
Both pawns.
Both, or yeah. And not by design, not by intention,
no.
You know, just sometimes certain kinds of things can't be thought out. And help them. So what we have here, let them see, they have a problem that's not just personal, that there's something systemic going on. So in a craft way, I mean, that's a kind of thing that I do with some frequency. And when I hear it correctly, you know, from them, and can point it out, it makes a real difference.
It sounds like the technique then, in part, is partially in helping them to form a conspiracy together and work together against the system.
Yeah, they have a common problem that they can address jointly.
Okay.
And that happens a lot in the context of organizational conflict.
Yeah.
But it's not always the case that it's seen that way. But I'm really oriented towards looking for that kind of stuff now. And you very often find it. And that comes, I think, from one of the advantages of being an inside operator within an organization with a cumulative amount of experience is you come to understand something of its patterns. Because otherwise, the personal qualities of the conflict have a much more dramatic, you know, they're much more compelling, so that's what you'll pay attention to. So you have to not be taken in by that. So at the craft level, that's one, you know, it's a real point of satisfaction. The other point of satisfaction for me as an ombudsman, especially now working where I am at the National Institutes of Health, is being able to work in conflict situations where the consequence of resolving the conflict goes beyond merely satisfying the needs and interests of the individual disputants, because oftentimes what it means is, without this sounding too grandiose, saving an important research project.